Buckeyes defense has been incredible thus far. As we welcome in Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Gerd, thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So my question is, so far in this season, this defense has been a perfect combination of scheme, staff, and stars. Is it sustainable?
That's a really good question. I don't know that 5 points per game is sustainable, but uh, everything that they've got is, you know, that is something that can progress forward. I think you have to expect some offenses to be able to catch up and start to out scheme you once they see more of what you do. So Ohio State has to make sure they're self scouting. The talent should only get better, barring, injuries and things like that. So I think the talent will be there. The scheme will continue to grow. And yeah, I think this is all something that, defense travels, as they say, and it will only get, I don't want to say better, it will only get more capable. How's that sound?
I would say they'd only get more comfortable, but we found out on Tuesday Ryan Day doesn't want anybody to be comfortable in the Ohio State house, as the big names against Washington, Caden Curry and Caden McDonald. Curry tying a Ohio State program record with 5 TFLs. McDonald a big force in the middle as well. A big question mark coming into this season was that defensive line, simply because they had to replace all 4 starters, all 4 off to the NFL. And so far, Curry and McDonald, Kenyatta Jackson, they have played up to the billing we've been hearing about for the last couple of years. We haven't seen it because of the guys ahead of them, but they're certainly playing up to their billing.
They are. They fit into Matt Patricia's defensive line scheme very, very well. And you're seeing Caden Curry make plays everywhere. He's a defensive end. There are times where he's playing some sort of quasi nose tackle, and he's too quick for centers to handle him. We saw that when he had a sack on what was going to be a screen pass, but he got back to the quarterback too quickly for the quarterback to actually get rid of the ball. Washington's DeMond Williams. But if you watch him in this in the Washington game or any game, everybody talks about his effort, and he gives you 110% every snap. Like, he is athletic as heck. He's smart. He knows where the ball is going. He gets to it. He's able to be somebody that makes plays on the backside. If you leave him unblocked, that's fine by him. He'll just make sure that he'll cut the line and get to the back. It's been very interesting and fun to watch. And then Caden McDonald, I don't know how many interior players are playing as well as he is, and he's showing his pass rush skills. Back to his high school days when he had 7 sacks in a playoff game. He's not just a run stuffing nose tackle. He's a playmaker, and he was also an issue for the Washington center, who just had a very rough day of things with the Ohio State defensive line. And then Kenyatta Jackson, credited with 1 sack, probably should have been credited with more than that. But when you've got 5 guys meeting at the quarterback on a handful of plays, how do you get everybody the credit that they need statistically?
It's not a surprise that there were several false starts in that game in Washington, but the shocker was it was more false starts for the Huskies than for the Buckeyes, partially because of the way that defensive line was playing for Ohio State.
Yeah, and you could see that there was concern from Washington pretty early on, and it's always, the Mike Tyson thing. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and that's what Ohio State's defensive line did. And Washington gets 8 yards on their first play, and then nothing and nothing on their next 2, and it's like, okay, so this is what it's like. And you saw maybe just some realization kick in, but then also the Buckeye defensive line continued to kick in as well. And you can throw Arvell Reese in there as well, who can play wherever. It's very interesting to watch right now how this Ohio State defense is playing. And there are snaps in this game where the defensive line makes the play, but you look behind them and everybody's covered and there's a spy. And so it's like, what is DeMond Williams supposed to do in situations like that? Excellent performance, great game plan, and everybody did their jobs. Even Edric Houston, there are plays where all he was supposed to do is just run off to the side, basically, and make sure that DeMond Williams, if he comes this way, he'll get tackled. But you're supposed to basically just discourage him from coming that way, and that's what he did. He would just twist out there, and it's like, well, okay, I can't go out there. Where else can I go? And it's like, you don't get any stats for that, but you did your job, and it leads to a sack.
we've seen this for a couple of years now, opposing teams trying to kind of take the air out of the ball, longer possession so the Ohio State offense doesn't have the ball. And now it seems as if the Ohio State offense is leaning into that as well. As Ryan Day pointed out several times earlier this week, Buckeyes only had 6 possessions in the game at Washington.
Yeah, 3 of those in the first half when they lost a possession due to the muffed punt or the punt fumble. And when you only have a handful of possessions, you need to make the most of everyone. You need to execute. Every play becomes more important. And you go back to, like, I went and looked at the 2018 season. Ohio State averaged almost 7 possessions in the first half of every game that year. To give you an idea of how the game has changed because of the first down rules and because of teams huddling now, because of the sign stealing and the in helmet communication. Like, the game is different now. You can still play it the way it used to be, but also you can play it slowed down. And Ohio State started this last year because of their plan to play 16 games and lessen the wear and tear. And they're continuing that this year as well. And what it does is it made them fast in December and January last year, made them healthy. It's not always all that exciting to go back and watch, at least the offense. It's not the 45 points per game that people have become accustomed to under Ryan Day. And so there's been an adjustment period there in terms of expectations for the offense and lighting up the scoreboard and why aren't there more points? And it's like, well, there are fewer possessions. So if there are fewer possessions, there are going to be fewer points.
I thought Day put it very succinctly. It's no longer a long race. It's more a marathon of sprints in college football now in terms of the length of the season and how you have to prepare for all that. National television commentators talking about Ohio State need for a fullback during that game against the Huskies, but Ryan Day doesn't sound like he's willing to take a scholarship to a fullback at this point in time.
Yeah, he believes they have tight ends that can do that job, and it would be a lot to a scholarship to a fullback just to do the one thing that they want their to do in the I formation. And so they've got freshman Nate Roberts there, freshman tight end Nate Roberts, and he missed a block on the first fourth down. He got a block later on that led to the touchdown for C.J. Donaldson. He got his block in the Texas game when he was out there on C.J. Donaldson's touchdown. So he's learning. Uh, I we saw it's been a while. Probably, gosh, you got to go back to maybe, I don't know, Zach Boren, the last time Ohio State had a scholarship fullback. They eventually gave Mitch Rossi a scholarship, but like he was a walk on. And there are different types of tight ends that you can use in that role, or different bigger backs that you can use in that role. And as they said, you can't just do one thing and be of service to Ohio State. Basically, it's not a waste of a spot, but there are better ways to utilize a spot because you can't just do one thing. You need to be able to do multiple things. And you're not going to just bring in a guy that only blocks, and that's at tight end. You're not going to bring in a running back that only runs the ball. He said all 3 of their top backs right now can play wide receiver if need be. That's a prerequisite. You got to be able to catch the ball. Tight ends got to be able to catch. They got to be able to block. They got to be able to run routes. And so, yeah, I'm not just going to bring in somebody to block.
Yeah, Zach Bourne was used so much as a fullback in 2012, they switched him to linebacker midseason, of course, leaving the moment against Michigan in the sack and the hulking over of prostrate Devin Gardner. Red zone woes against Washington, those were different than the red zone woes they had against Ohio.
Yeah. Uh, Mistakes, mental mistakes, penalties, and some negative plays that put them behind the behind schedule, and they almost got back on schedule with some of their plays, but came up just short. So that's a different thing than before, where it's just maybe some inaccurate throws or a missed block. So, like, the good news is these are all fixable. The bad news is they're all different problems, and so that there's some concern there. I I I don't think things are that bad. You'll know when things are bad in the red zone when they talk about maybe we need to put in Lincoln Keynotes in a red zone package, and try to make this a more gimmicky thing because the norm isn't working. So we've got to go outside the box and go with a gimmick package. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that in this offense. I'm saying if that's your number one option in the red zone, you've got some big problems. And I don't think they're there yet. They just have to continue figuring out how best to finish off the plays. CJ Donaldson has to get lower. Maybe Bo Jackson needs to get more involved down in the short yardage. He's not really done that yet. So they've got some time. They'll figure it out. But it's going to be interesting to watch to see how they do because again with these shortened games and these fewer possessions, if you're not clicking in the red zone, you're going to give your opponent an opportunity. It's reminds me of like trestle ball. One mistake can cost you a win. And so when you're playing that way, playing close to the vest, then you better make sure you're scoring in the red zone, touchdowns.
Buckeyes hosting Minnesota this week. P.J. Fleck, the Golden Gophers head coach, a GA under Jim Tressel back in 2006. It's a 3-1 Gophers team. Their one loss on the road to California. What do you take out of this Minnesota team? Are they a good team, or is it 3-1 because they haven't really played anybody?
Well, and I'm just started watching the game against Rutgers, the win that they got against Rutgers, and you're looking at this early on, and you're wondering how in the world does Minnesota win this game because Rutgers is moving the ball on them. They're Minnesota's banged up. If Rutgers is moving the ball and throwing the ball and running the ball on you, what does that say about your chances against Ohio State? So I think what Minnesota is they're always going to be a tough fight for Rutgers and programs like that and get their 7-8 wins thanks to their non-conference schedule as well. But against Ohio State and the horseshoe, like there should only be so much fight. And when you hear PJ Fleck talk about Ohio State, it's clear he has such reverence for the place and for Ohio State. And he even mentioned that I think in his Monday press conference. When you've been there, you appreciate it a lot more. And whenever he talks about Ohio State or Jim Tressel or Ryan Day, he is effusive in his praise for the place.
Gophers defense statistically right behind Ohio State's in terms of both total defense and rush defense.
It's it's interesting because they have I don't know fits and starts things where they'll give up some yards and then they'll shut it down. And I think the key for Ohio State is just to stay consistent. And you know they were fairly consistent against Washington, but they didn't have that big play. Maybe Ohio State needs some consistency and then find the big play. But you see, Rutgers was able to run the ball on them with their running back, able to throw the ball. And so I think a lot of what Minnesota has been built on is a weak schedule to this point, and yet Cal and Rutgers have been able to expose that defense a little bit. And I would assume Ohio State will do the same should they choose to, because I thought the same thing against Washington.
P.J. Fleck now in his 9th season as Minnesota's head coach. That is the 3rd longest tenured coach in the Big Ten behind Kirk Ferentz and James Franklin. We'll let you decide for yourself if there's any correlation between the letter F and long-term stability. Hopefully Luke Fickell is finding that in Wisconsin. I want to thank Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com for joining us. Gerd, thank you.
Thank you for having me.